Everybody, I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold here, and we have our weekly lecture series. Now, not sure what to call this one. It's sort of great players of the past, except I think Ian still plays a little bit, although maybe he doesn't. But the topic of the lecture is Australian chess players, great Australian chess players. The sponsor, who's anonymous, although he is Australian, so maybe I gave too much information away. Maybe you can swat him now just because he's Australian. He's a chess player, and he wanted me to talk about 3 specific players, and I have heard of all of them. One of them passed away a few years ago. The other 2 probably play like once every 2 years or something. They're older now. And so I want to thank our sponsor who wants to do this lecture in memory of Greg Hjorth, who was not only a great chess player, and we're going to talk about him during the lecture, but also was a great mathematician. And a friend of mine and a former student, Matt Larson, he's always worried about whether there's nobody on earth better than him in math and chess at the same time. And he doesn't think anybody's better than him at math or chess right now. Although at their peak, obviously John Nunn was, and then Lasker's not alive anymore, but okay, Lasker's the pretty good one. And a lot of the people that have had higher ratings than Matt Larson and possibly better titles and are great at math, they're sort of older now. So he wants to find somebody like in their 20s or 30s who's better than him. And Greg Hjorth, at his peak in chess and in math, was better than Matt Larson at his peak, although Matt Larson hasn't reached his math peak yet. So sometimes it is possible to be good at 2 things. Matt Larson just got a PhD at Stanford in math, and he's going to do some kind of complicated, I forgot what it was. I read it when he texted me a few weeks ago at Princeton. He's going to be at Princeton for about a year doing something super complicated. So anyway, first person we're going to talk about, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the 3 players, and then I'm going to look at their games. Although there's more than, there's many great Australian chess players who at some point became grandmaster or even better than average grandmasters, which isn't easy to do in Australia because if you want to play international competition, then go pretty far away. Okay, Ian Rogers is the one that I know the most, and he's the strongest of the 3. He's been a grandmaster forever, since 85, and this is 2024, so almost 40 years. He's 64 now. It says he was born in Tasmania. I've known Ian Rogers forever, and we played in a lot of tournaments together in Europe when I lived in Belgium from 88 to 92, and he spent half of his time in Amsterdam and half of his time in Australia. So I saw him about half the time. And we played once in a FIDE-rated tournament, which I think was in the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia at that time, which we drew. And he was better. I probably should have lost. And then I think he beat me in a tournament that wasn't FIDE-rated, but I could be imagining that. But he was better than me. I was an IM, and even at my absolute best, my absolute best, no, his peak rating is much higher than my peak rating. Yes, he was always better than me. Born in Australia, he's considered by most people the first Australian grandmaster. Some people, not me, consider, and not our sponsor, consider Walter Brown the first Australian grandmaster. But Walter Brown grew up in New York. He was technically born in Australia, but he lived in the U.S. when he was a teenager and got good at chess in the U.S. So he didn't really play chess in Australia. So he's not wouldn't call him. And if you've ever heard Walter Brown speak, and I've heard him speak hundreds of times, he ain't Australian. In fact, my dad, when he was at his peak in the mid to late 60s, played Walter Brown speed chess for money before Walter Brown was at his peak, and my dad beat him and took his money. So, he grew up in New York. Ian Rogers has a Bachelor of Science in Meteorology from University of Melbourne, which I did not know, even though I know him pretty well. In fact, about 7 years ago, I'm guessing 7 years ago, it could be 8 or 9, I did commentary with Ian Rogers at like the Sinkfield Cup and for a live audience. And it was weird. I've never done commentary with somebody before who did not sit down. I don't know why he didn't sit down, if it's medical or he just doesn't like sitting down. So he stood the chairs, and I've done commentary with Hess and Hansen and probably 3 or 4 other people in St. Louis in that same area. I've never had somebody not sit down. He never sat down, Ian Rogers. So if you need somebody as a stand-in, Ian's your guy. He's married to Kathy Rogers. I know her as well. She's an international arbiter, a woman FIDE master, and a lawyer. I've never seen her play chess, but I have seen her actually be an arbiter. He's also the cousin of an Australian cricketer that I haven't heard of. I think I've heard of 2 cricketers in history. So, Chris Rogers. So if you're Australian, I assume you've heard of most of the cricketers because you're Australian. And Chris Rogers is his cousin. And anyway, Wikipedia talks about his successes. He has a lot of successes. Basically, all you have to know is he represented Australia in 14 chess Olympiads, 12 of them on board 1. I mean, the rest of Wikipedia you don't need. This is the true Australian Grandmaster. And you can read about him and what he did. He won the Medal of Order of Australia, or is awarded that, for his service to chess. He streams on Twitch under the name GMIANR. I've never seen his stream. I didn't know he was a streamer. I thought I was the oldest streamer. Anyway, at his absolute peak, he was ranked 50th in the world in 1999. And he was the highest rated Australian player from 84 until he retired in 2007. And he's also written a few books, which you can see, and they have notable games and so forth. And like for me, and your mileage may vary, he's the best Australian player ever, Ian Rogers. And me knowing him, sort of helps with that. Okay, next player who I also know, I know of him, is Darryl Johansen. Darryl Johansen is the second Grandmaster in Australia after Ian, and he's won the Australian Championship 6 times, and he's a Grandmaster. And he's also represented Australia in 14 Olympiads, just like Ian Rogers did. He was IM in 82, Grandmaster in 95. And they talk about his career, not as good as Ian Rogers' career, but still pretty good. And he's a year older than Ian Rogers, and played in a lot of Olympiads for Australia. That's why he's well known. And there's a better article, better than Wikipedia, on chess on ChessBase. It was written in 2019, and it talks about Darryl Johansen. This was for his 60th birthday, which was 5 years ago. And a lot of pictures of him. This picture takes me back because this clock with the red buttons, that's a Hoyer clock. That clock was like $100 when clocks cost like $30. And then I saw one on the internet a few years ago for like $500 because they stopped making them, and it's just a beautiful clock. That was in 82 that picture was taken. Then there's pictures from the Olympiad. This one's in 2004. And there's some games he played. They have a game he beat Kudrin and a game he beat Robert Jamieson. Well, he's an IM also from Australia. And a pretty nice article, actually, about Darryl Johansen. And we'll look at one of his games, or a couple, in the lecture. The third, and this lecture is dedicated to his memory, he passed away in 2011, is Greg Hjorth. He was an Australian professor of math, international chess master, and along with Ian Rogers was the Commonwealth champion in 1983. And half of the article talks about chess and half talks about his math career. He came second in the 1980 Australian Championship when he was 16. He won several tournaments and played 3 times in the Olympiad for Australia and so forth. Maybe better at math than chess, maybe. I don't know. I can't prove it, but based on what I read, I think he was probably grandmaster strength at math, and he only became an IM in chess. And he died suddenly of a heart attack when he was 47 years old in 2011. It's unfortunate. And the only book that they have listed on Wikipedia is the one that he wrote on math. So, published in Providence, Rhode Island. So there you go. Okay, so Rogers, Johansen, and Hjorth are the 3 Australian players we're going to talk about and look at their games today. And let's go to the games. Okay, the first game I'm going to look at is the game Ian Rogers played in the 1992 Chess Olympiad against Gilberto Milos. And if I'm correct, and I'm not saying I am, I think Milos plays for Brazil. So this must have been Australia versus Brazil. Ian's white. Ian is a very uncompromising player. He doesn't like draws, and he plays very interesting chess, irrespective of his opponent's rating. Okay, so his opponent played a little unusual, and so did he, and they transposed into this known position from a different move order. I've had white and black in this position, just not at the same time. And I've never played bishop g5 in this position. Ian gave up the 2 bishops and castled queenside pretty quickly. So very uncompromising play. Maybe a little anti-positional for white, but white's getting a lot of space. White gave up the 2 bishops. Black has a very solid position. And white wants to progress without overextending and leaving lots of weaknesses. King b1, always play king b1. Black doesn't want to castle kingside because white's already attacking there. So black castled queenside. d5 I like a lot, pushing in the center. Black finally castled. White has more space in the center and the king side. Black is very passive, and black's bishops aren't so good either. The knight reroutes to c4. I like it. Very good. Rook d3. White wants to swing his rook over to b3 and attack the black king. And bishop f5, looks like black wants to play f5 here. That's why he played rook f8. Okay, now up until here, I think this game is pretty well played, and I especially like white's position. White has more space everywhere. Black's bishops are inactive, and I can't really find a good plan for black. Having said that, what black did pretty soon is strategically totally crazy. And I can't explain why black would play such a way. And if you have the internet handy, and since you're on YouTube now, you do, there's a game you can look up between Garry Kasparov White and Sting, the singer from The Police, as black. They're playing in a simultaneous that Kasparov was giving to the music group The Police, like 30 years ago. And the bishop that Milos gets reminds me of Sting's bishop in that game. And you can find the game easily. Just type Kasparov Sting and you'll see the game. But this reminds me of that, except Sting's bishop was the dark squared bishop on the other side of the board, but it was exactly the same idea. Okay, he played bishop h7. Normally, I would say, I wonder why he played bishop h7. But I don't wonder for long. Then he played g6. As Hesh said on The Sopranos, there's good and there's no good. That's no good. Yeah, you can't block your bishop in like that. So a terrible decision from Milos. Okay, d takes c6. He doesn't want black to move the f pawn and eventually play bishop g8 and activate the bishop. So he takes over here. Now, if Milos takes the bishop, I have knight d5, forking your queen and bishop, and then if you play queen d8, I can play c7, and if you take this, I take, and then I can take on f5, and white's up material, and the d6 pawn is hanging, and black's rooks are terrible. So after dc, black played b takes c6. Rogers played bishop d7. And after queen c7, he surprised Milos by playing bishop c6 check. So white's going to be a piece down, but since that piece is here, white's not really a piece down. And he gets the d5 square for his knight, which is definitely worth a lot, threatening the bishop, threatening the queen, and rook b3, rook d3. White uses all of his pieces to attack, and black uses all of his pieces to defend the king side. If you can call those pieces. Bishop a5, always sack the exchange. Rook c3, takes, and the game ended very funnily here. Try to find the winning move for white. There might be more than one winning move, but this move is spectacular, and it's real. You can ask Sidra if you don't believe me. So pause the video here. Try to find the move that Rogers played that finished the game off. Okay, and we're back. He played queen a6. So the idea is white's threatening queen takes queen. And if black plays queen takes queen, knight c7 is checkmate. So if I was black, I guess I would play rook c8, then knight b6 check. Now, if king goes here, there's many ways to win. Knight takes rook is discovered check, and then rook takes c3 wins, and queen takes a7 wins. Everything wins. But I don't know. I mean, this white's going to be a queen up with the bishop on h7. That's simple enough. And the line I was looking at by myself without an engine was rook c8, knight b6, queen takes, rook takes, and white's threatening queen b7 mate. And if black plays rook c7, I can just take the bishop, and white's up too much material, along with the bishop on h7 being trapped. So then I looked at this, and this was all done in my head, so it could be wrong. But after takes, I realized white could play queen c6 check and then take the bishop on c3, and black has to resign. So after queen a6, in this position, black did end up resigning, and Ian won the game. And this was in 1992 Olympiad, and what happened was they have a brilliancy prize, and unfortunately, this game should have won. But when I say unfortunately, Kasparov was on the committee to decide who would win the Brilliancy Prize, and he kept telling people his own game should win the Brilliancy Prize. And it did. So, yeah, that was unfortunate because this game was, Kasparov's game wasn't brilliant at all. I think it was his game with Nikolic and a Slav. And it's just zero brilliancy, but he won the game nicely, and he wanted to win the Brilliancy Prize. So instead of recusing himself, he said, vote for my game. Frankly, terrible. Okay, now another part of the game I wanted to show you was this one. This is Kirill Georgiev, the strong Georgiev. And he has the white pieces versus Ian Rogers. This was in the Beal Interzonal in 1993, in which I was there at the tournament. I was playing in the Beal Open tournament. And I had 6 wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw in that tournament. But this was the Interzonal, a tournament I'm not allowed to play in. But I was allowed to be in the building. So that was good. Okay, Kirill Georgiev was one of the top 30, 40 players in the world, probably at this time. And Ian played the Benko Gambit, and they got a crazy position. And in this position, Ian played E takes D4. Kirill Georgiev went after the C pawn, bishop A3. And Ian realized he didn't need to defend the C pawn. He just played bishop E5, attacking the H pawn. And, I mean, Georgiev didn't want to waste a tempo with H3 or G3. So he was like, well, H pawn doesn't matter. I'll take the C pawn. The D pawn is hanging. The knight on D7 is hanging. I have passed B pawns. Currently, white is up 2 pawns. So he thought that would be good. That'd give white an advantage. And he was shell-shocked after bishop H2, king H1. Again, you can pause your video. Black to play and win. Very nice tactic, which Georgiev missed. And as a consequence, Ian was able to win the game. Okay, and we're back. The answer is bishop takes G2 check. Obviously, Georgiev saw what was happening now, and he resigned. If he plays king takes, which he didn't do, rook takes F2 check. Now, in this position, white can play king H3, king H1, king takes rook, or rook takes rook. If king takes rook, this is checkmate. If king H3, then this is checkmate. If rook takes rook, I check. You can go to H1 or F1, doesn't matter. And this is checkmate. If your king's on H1, it's also checkmate. And last but not least, white could play king H1, which actually looks okay. Although I'm guessing... Actually, no, queen G3 doesn't win. I wasn't looking at queen G3 winning. I thought it also won, but I think queen G3 loses to bishop C4 check, and then queen takes rook on F2. But the win that I did see, which I don't see refutation of, is queen A8 check. And there's a small possibility that Georgiev saw bishop G2, but didn't see queen A8 check. That's if we're being nice. In reality, I don't think he saw bishop G2, rook F2. And, you know, white can give away the bishop and the knight, but I just take them with check and win. So after bishop G2 check, Georgiev resigned. And I'm sure in this position, Georgiev wasn't thinking, I'm going to resign in 3 moves. Probably thought he was better because he's up a pawn. And after bishop G2 check, his king doesn't have enough shelter after black plays rook F2 check and comes in with his pieces and gives checkmate. Very nice win against a higher rated player from Ian. Okay, next. We have Ivan Sokolov white against Darryl Johansen. Darryl Johansen was bored 2 often for the Australian Olympic team. This was played in the Chess Olympiad 1992. And let's see, Ivan Sokolov in 92. Well, he either played for Bosnia-Herzegovina or he played for the Netherlands. I don't know, because he's played for both. I don't know who he played for 32 years ago. Probably Bosnia still, probably. But I don't know. You guys can look it up and tell me on YouTube who he played for in '92. Okay, they played a Nimzo, and I could have skipped most of the game because the game is very Nimzo-y. So if you like Nimzo Indians with either color, and next month I have a chessable course on this position. And a lot of the ideas played in this game are mentioned in my course. Okay, and actually, against most moves, I give b6. So this position's also in my course. Okay, knight e4 I don't give. I think I give either bishop b7 or bishop a6. Knowing me, it would be bishop a6. Knowing me. Okay, so he played knight e4, f3, and black maintained the two bishops. Then white got the big center. Black played knight c6, bishop a6, knight a5, which is standard Nimzo Indian stuff. You want to take the pawn on c4. And the reason white played bishop d3 was to play queen e2 and defend his c-pawn. So instead of letting white get rid of the double pawns, black plays d6 and eventually c5. Here he's playing on the king side. And finally c5. So black is saying, I'm going to hold you. You can't go forward anymore. And eventually I'll do something like queen a4 or rook c8, and I'll win your c4 pawn. And white says, I have a big center and the two bishops. And the arbiter says, no talking. Okay, so the game went in typical Nimzo fashion. White defended his c4 pawn again. Black blocked up the center. White said, I want the center open. I have the two bishops. Black said, no, let's close the center. And I think d takes e5 is the beginning of white's downfall. That looks very anti-positional, giving white the isolated doubled c-pawns. And black doesn't take any of the pawns. He just leaves white saddled with all these terrible pawns. Black finally gets his pawn back. And material's equal, but look at white's pawn structure. Frankly, terrible. And they go into an ending. He's trying to give white more doubled pawns. He says, fine. And white's pawns are all falling, and black can't really defend. Black doesn't have any pawns to attack. Okay, so we're back to even material with white having the worst pawn structure ever. Now white's a pawn up. And black plays very nice tactic here, which I think Ivan must have missed. Knight check, and then rook f5. And I'm guessing that he didn't see that. And now if the knight moves away, then black's rooks are on the rook here on f2. If the knight doesn't move away, I take it. So black wins a knight. The knight on f7 is trapped. Again, you can't move the knight because then your rook isn't defended on f2. There's a black rook on f8. So he tried to attack this knight, and then he trapped it. And this is a very funny position, and this is why I showed you this game. First of all, Ivan Sokolov is 155 points FIDE higher rated than Darryl Johansen, so it's an upset. Second of all, this is a very humorous position because black can't move the knight and white can't move anything, otherwise I can move the knight. The rook is protecting the knight's escape squares. So if the rook moves, my knight can go to one of those squares, unless you move your rook to d3, which is illegal. So white can't move his rook. So all white can do is move the pawns until they can't move and move the king back and forth. And while white was doing that, black found the winning continuation. So white just played king g1, king g2. And then black made sure that white couldn't move anymore. And now, if you move your king, I play king takes h3, and you still can't move anymore. So he played a3, g6, and black stopped white from playing rook here check. And white resigned because white has no move. There's nothing white can do here. Very strange position. If you play, let's say king g1, I take on h3. And here's the funny part. If you play king h1, I have more than one way to win, but this is obviously the cutest. Obviously. Knight g3 check and mate. So after g6, white is in zugzwang. White can't move the knight. White can't move the rook because the knight can escape. And the only other move is king g1, king h1, and then black wins with king takes h3, etc. So it's nice to beat a higher rated player where they literally can't move, and figuratively. So great game, and it was in a chess Olympiad, which a lot of the famous games of the Australian players are, because that's where they play high rated foreign players in the Olympiads. Okay, this is the next game that I wanted to show of Darryl Johansen. This was in Hastings Open tournament in 1980. And this game is too exciting. So if you have a weak heart, be careful. This game has more sacrifices than atoms in the universe. Okay, first of all, white played the Musio Gambit in the King's Gambit by transposition. Okay, so this is a piece sacrifice, and this position you would see a lot in the 1800s. Not people who are rated 1800, but the year's 1800s. Okay, queen g5, knight d5, and Darryl Johansen says, yeah, you can take my c-pawn and take my rook. Everybody's sacking everything. Knight f6, he takes the rook on a8. He doesn't take the rook, he plays the move d3, playing for tricks. King takes, bishop f4 check, winning black's queen. The dog doesn't like it. The dog says things are rough. Rough. Rook g8, threatening checkmate on g2. g3. Knight h5, attacking g3 again. Bishop takes f7. Both of black's rooks are hanging. Knight takes g3. White plays for mate. Bishop takes rook. Knight takes check. King takes d5, allowing the bishop to come out to h3 or g4 with attack. And if you told me 5, 6, 7 moves ago, black would lose his rook on the king's side and his rook on the queen's side would still be there, not sure I would believe you. King f2, bishop c5, bishop g4 attacking the queen, takes, queen h4 check, and white resigned. Black has no interest in the queen, black has interest in the king. And in this position, if you can still blunder and lose if you want, you can take the queen, oops, knight e6 check wins your queen. I guess white's winning there, but I wouldn't bet on it because it's too confusing. White's a piece up, I'm not sure if he's winning. So queen h4 check, now we can take the queen later, and here white resigned because white's getting checkmated and losing his queen. That was a brilliant game from black, sacrificing both of his rooks. White didn't take one and getting a big attack against white's king after white sacrificed a piece in the opening to get it black's king. And that's the King's Gambit for you. You get really exciting sacrificial games. And I think for the most part, the Australian players like that a lot. Okay, last but not least, game between Tony Miles, great British player, also died too young, versus Greg Hjorth. And Greg, this lecture is dedicated to your memory. This was played in Brighton in England in 1984 in the British Championship. They played Queen's Gambit, Tarish defense, and they played 1 billion moves of theory. This is so theoretical that I know it. Okay, this is the old main line. This position, knight d2. Okay, a6. This position, I think black can play many moves, but this is like a tabia, like a starting position for the Tarish, is this position. Okay, a6, the bishop can get back to a7, which he does. And both sides develop and try to improve their positions. Very creative rook lift. Black has 2 bishops. Pawn on d4 is isolated, but it's pretty good. So I think black has already solved all of his opening problems, if he had any to begin with. Looks like good position for black. Tripling up. Never play f3. f5, confusing the audience. So clearly, takes is going to be in black's favor. This looks terrible for white. So he played queen c4 check, then bishop d3. White's king seems a little airy there. And black always sacrifices the exchange. And white traded and then did not trade queens. He didn't trade queens. After takes, there's just too many threats. So, for example, if white plays knight f1, I can just take it because that defends my rook. And black's going to have 2 pieces for a rook. Another move that looks logical is knight c4 in this position. And then I can go check. And then d3 is check. So you have to take the bishop. And then I can take the rook. Either way, I don't know which way is better. And black is obviously winning this position with the pawn on the 7th rank. White's king's no good. White's rook's no good. Okay, so he didn't trade queens, Miles. He played rook g1, d3, attacking both rooks, the rook on c2 and the rook on g1 by discovery. Queen c3 check. The king hides on h6. Rook c1. Black wins his exchange back. Queen f2. And, well, Miles should resign here because black's threatening rook e2. So if it was black to move, rook e2 would just end the game. So he played queen c1, hoping after rook e2, the knight can move with discovered check. But unfortunately, after f4, there's no more tricks. We can't move the knight because f3 is hanging. For example, knight e4, queen f3 check and mate. And you can't check on the diagonal, and you can't move your knight. So it's time to resign. It's good he didn't resign. He played queen c7, and black finished the game off in immaculate fashion. So if you're watching on YouTube now, pause the video and try to find the winning move that black played. And of course, queen takes knight wins. There's no doubt about it. White's threatening queen takes f4 check. Queen takes knight, defends the pawn, and wins a piece. But there's a much quicker way to win. Okay, and the answer is bishop g2 check, and now Miles resigned. The only legal move is to take, and then rook e1 check just leads to checkmate. White can play knight f1, and then every capture for black and every position leads to mate. So that's a pretty nice win with the black pieces against, one of the top 10, 15 players in the world for Greg, who never became a GM, but obviously was able to play at GM strength, if necessary. And this lecture is dedicated to Greg. Thanks to our sponsor. I think he actually was friends with Greg back in the day, maybe working together or knowing each other from chess. And he wasn't as famous as the other players, but he had great victories and was great in more than one field. I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold. Thanks for watching our weekly lecture on Australia's great players. If you want to sponsor a lecture, contact my wife Karen. Her email is karen@hclchessclub.com. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment. Bye.